That little intro you just saw was shot entirely with the GoPro Hero 6. In this video, we're going to discuss how you can get the most out of your GoPro camera. Stick around. Okay, so let's look into the settings of the GoPro, which you probably should use for your cinematics. So let's talk about resolution first, okay? You should be thinking about exporting to 1080, so you should be shooting, in theory, you should be shooting at 4K or 2.7K. I would prefer 2.7K as your preferred method and change that to the linear view because it gives you a more standard look for a normal camera, not as such a wide angle that the GoPro can have. You should primarily think about finalizing your project at 1080, shooting at 2.7K most of your shots, and when you want to do close-ups or zooms, for instance, you can bump it up to 4K and perform a little digital zoom or something, because you're not going to lose any quality because you're shooting your final output will be the 1080. So that's for resolution. So my advice is shoot at 2.7K, which is good base resolution, 24 frames per second. Obviously, in every format you shoot, don't shoot any more than that unless you want to do slow motion. Then you can bump it up to 100 or maybe 50, but 100 is more suitable for slow motion. Just forget about 4K 60. It won't give you a slow enough motion, I think, for what you might want. Well, you never know. You might, but basically 2.7K and 24 frames per second. Okay, let's talk about settings. Let's admit that I'm shooting at 2.7K, and well, shutter should be set at 48, okay? Because the shutter should always be set to double your frame rate. The shutter angle should always be double your frame rate. For if you're shooting 24 frames per second, your shutter should be 48, okay? Moving on to ISO. Let's leave it at the minimum of 100 and maximum 400 because the GoPro is a very, very noisy camera. The sensor is so small that it produces a lot of noise very easily. So we want to keep that to a minimum. So I'd say shoot between 100 and 400 and just use lights if you have to light your scene, okay? When it comes to white balance, keep it at native, okay? Don't pick any one of those unless you're very sure of what you want to do. Don't go for auto because it might change from shot to shot and you don't want that. Keep it at native and then you can change that. Sharpness, keep it at low because you can always sharpen it later. Color profile, you can go for GoPro if you don't want to color grade your footage, but I leave it at flat. So you have more room to grade when you're in post. Audio is irrelevant because you should be recording your audio separately, okay? But if you won't record your audio separately, my suggestion is keep your audio off and do your manual auto control. Go stereo only. Don't let the camera process anything, okay? Let's talk video stabilization. In low light, it's a big no-no. Do not use video stabilization in low light. My advice for you is actually do not use video stabilization at all. Try to find a gimbal for your GoPro, a tripod. Just don't use stabilization at all because it's a video stabilization. It's a digital stabilization. You don't really want that. As good as it is, and it is, Hero 6, I don't recommend it at all. Just because it crops in the image a little more, and you want to extract the maximum quality that you can out of the camera, okay? And that's basically it for the settings. So to recap is I'd set my standard at 2.7K at 4K basically, and the biggest reason for this is because you can switch to linear, which gives you a little more standard view, not so wide angle. Okay, let me try to get back here. And if you want to make a zoom, if you want to do close-ups and stuff like that, you can bump it up to 4K. And that'll work for you, okay? And you can always digital zoom. And obviously, as I said, it's imperative that you output at 1080 so you can zoom in and not lose any quality in any of these formats that you record, okay? And that's basically it for the GoPro settings. So let's move along. Okay, so here we are on the timeline of the intro you saw at the beginning of this video. And let's see what I did to make this a little more cinematic. So let me show you what we started with. So let me disable a few layers. This is basically the GoPro straight out of the camera, as you can see here. It doesn't look all that great, all these shots. what I first did was I created this adjustment layer you see here. An adjustment layer is very simple. It's something you can do instead of changing everything in every single clip. You just make an adjustment layer and place it on top. And as you can see, the difference was this, okay? So I removed the grain as much as I could. I didn't use any denoiser. I simply played around with the curves on the Lumetri color grade options. And this is basically it, okay? And the next thing I did was, actually this is wrong because it shouldn't be here. Let me just take that off. This should be, yeah, exactly. This is, because I made the crop earlier with the adjustment layer, okay? So what I then did was, I got myself some CinemaScope 235-1 crop, okay? You can get this online fairly easy. This is what I'm talking about here. Obviously you can't see it. Then you drag it onto the timeline and boom, you see there they are. You just have to stretch them a little bit and get them in size, or you can get, you know, the correct size off the bat. What I did was I got that and boom, there you go. You got the CinemaScope widescreen letterbox illusion. Obviously it's just an illusion. You're not doing anything. You're not shooting in anamorphic or anything like that. It just sells the cinematic feel a lot more. This one is basic. I'm sure you've heard about this. If you can't find it, all of you can do what I did yesterday because I couldn't find this file on my computer. You can just go to adjustment layer and in effects, just go crop, boom, and then you go, here it is, a crop. And what I did was, there you go, you see? And what I did was I cropped the bottom for 30% and the top for 13% and the bottom 30%. I got the illusion done. Basically, that's it. But I didn't go with that today. I decided to use the anamorphic. So what do I've done something here that I can't. Okay, the anamorphic crops taken out straight of the net. Anyway, that's one of the things you can do. And the other thing you can do is, now let's talk about what I did with the zoom. For instance, let's talk about this shot in particular. If I remove everything, you'll notice that on the top here, it's missing a little bit because I actually moved it down to make my composition the way I wanted it, as you see here. As you see here, because originally my head was being covered by the letterbox, so I adjusted that here. And these two shots here, the first three shots were shot in 2.7K, okay? And this shot here was shot in 4K because, as you see, it has a little zoom. If you see the original shot, if I go here and I remove the look at that. This is the original shot and this is what I used, okay? Boom, original shot and what I used. I went a little close up and I went a little further with this shot. As you can see here, let me just take the sound off, otherwise we can't hear shit. As you see here, it goes and it starts moving, it starts panning up. That is all digital, okay? Because if we look at the original shot, if we remove the motion, look at that. It's gone away because of the crop. Obviously the crop is covering it. Let me just remove the crop and there you go. What I basically did was I started in this area and just moved using the motion options on Premiere Pro. I just moved the camera up. It's basically, that's why you should always shoot in 4K and or 2.7K because it gives you the ability to do this, especially in 4K. You can really mess around exporting to exporting to a 1080p project. You can zoom in and you won't lose any quality. Look at what's happening without the crop. Look at that. Boom, and I'm moving. Look at that. It's beautiful. It's the image that's actually coming down. Look at that. And it's moving. And that's the illusion right there, okay? Let's put in the crop bars and boom. Let's, yeah, everything is activated now, I think, yeah. So basically this is the biggest benefit you'll get from shooting in 4K is the ability to zoom. And I think I'm blabbing on long enough, guys. This is basically it. I'm sure that I'm forgetting a few things. If I am, or if you have any questions, please leave it down in the comments below. But this is what I did. And I did this in about an hour. All these shots I did in about an hour. I lit this area of the screen here that you can see here. It took me about an hour, and you know, careful consideration and preparation, obviously. And I was, you know, a one-man band. I was acting as well, as bad as it was. I was myself, and yeah, I really wanted to make this because I wanted to prove that you can actually make a decent product with a GoPro. Obviously, it's not the best quality in the world because I am shooting in very extreme low lights, so I had to go through a lot of grading and stuff to try to salvage the footage as much as I could. But obviously, if you shoot in broad daylight or with enough light, you will not have these problems because the GoPro performs beautifully with enough light. I just decided to go with a darker theme because, you know, I like darker themes and I like to make horror stuff. And that's it, basically. And that is what I did with all these clips that I shot for the intro of this video. And the last thing I want to mention that really makes your GoPro shot cinematic is you. You make your GoPro shot cinematic. It's not the settings, it's not the crops, it's not the, you know, the resolution you shoot in. It's understanding film and wanting to make cinema. That's what makes, you know, your shot cinematic, with whatever camera you're using. That's the thing you should learn and focus. Because you can ask for all the settings, you can, you know, fine-tune all the camera you want, the camera the way you want, and say, talking about a GoPro, whatever camera you have. But ultimately, what makes the shot cinematic, what makes the product cinematic is you, is your talent, is your ability to edit correctly, is your ability to feel what you're doing and really believe in what you're doing. That is my last advice for everyone out there who wants to make, you know, your shot cinematic and all that stuff. And that's probably the main reason I decided to do this video. Of course, and all the stuff that I went through, the settings and all that is very important, obviously. But ultimately, what defines your film is you, is your ability to make film, to make cinema, to tell a story. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I sincerely hope you put a thumbs down below and yeah, and subscribe and all that jazz. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much. Oh, and if you do subscribe, please remember to tick that little bell thingy so you get notifications of the next videos I upload. Okay, thank you very much for putting up with me all this time, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.